All right. So, what's on the agenda? Anyone?
I'm Megan, and this.
Did anyone catch that?
Sorry, that was YouTube auto-playing. I'm trying to see if
okay.
I thought I had posted some of these videos.
Just looking at some of the past agenda there. So who usually run this meeting?
I think generally Lynn takes the lead on this one.
Sometimes, yeah. I was sick last time. Yeah, but today there's no topic. Does anyone have any questions regarding Ambient or the Z-tunnel? By the way, is the board the most updated place we should look for helping out?
For Z-tunnel items?
Yeah, for Z-tunnel?
Yeah, it should be. And okay. Steve and I will just, we're just looking at this yesterday. And by the way, is this a view everybody sees if you access this link?
Yeah, yes. I can see it. So yeah, so one question I have, I guess, regarding this board is, I think Greg, he was trying to assign him something because he was interested to help out with the config dump endpoint, and he found out he couldn't. Is that intentional?
So I run into a little issue here. I apparently didn't have access to make any changes here, but Greg is a maintainer, right?
Yeah, but maybe not a Z-tunnel maintainer, but he's a maintainer for Istio project.
Specific.
I think you can edit the issues, but not the project. I'll try and figure out a way to make it so that everyone in the org can access the project. I previously just shared it with select people because I didn't know what I was doing. I've never used projects before, so.
I was able to like change status and apply labels, but I just wasn't able to assign it to myself.
Says everyone in the organization can see and edit this project. So everyone in the org should be able to edit it. And if you can't assign an issue, I don't know, it should be the same permissions as Istio. I would think maybe. Actually, you know what? Maybe we didn't set it up the same way as the Istio projects, and I need to go add it to the community repo. Let me look into that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, John.
All right, issue will be solved soon. So.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I just said I'll send a PR and it will be solved today. So.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Greg, are you able to update the size field?
Sorry, the what field?
The size field. Whoops. Nah, that does not do what I wanted to do. So this one here.
I'm unfortunately away from my keyboard right now, but yeah, I was able to like change it between columns, add labels, and I believe adjust the milestone too. But
yeah, so the size is just another label. Sounds like you should be able to do that. So one thing in terms of running the project, one thing I like to enforce is for anything that's in the up next column, let's make sure that before we turn it into in progress, let's make sure that everything in the up next column have an estimated size. So that way we can project when the items can be done, and also establish some kind of execution velocity for this. And I'll document this somewhere.
Francis, I just checked. I don't have the ability to edit the size field.
Yeah, so Let's see. We'll get it sorted out.
Hey Josh, long time no see.
I know,
Hey,
hi
Josh.
guys. Yeah,
It's been about a year. Good to
a
see
little
you.
bit more. Yeah,
Yeah, almost 2 years. I feel like.
yeah.
Yeah, so Josh, to answer your question, I'm working on this on the Google end. We'll get this sorted out. But for now, we can reuse the TOC meeting link.
Okay. Should we update the, I mean, can we just temporarily update the invitation? It might just make it less confusing.
Justin, we've lost access to the calendar as well. So if you know how to do
Yes,
that,
that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Got it. Okay. Sorry. I thought it was just the recording issue you're trying to figure out. Okay.
Louis, I think you may still have access to the calendar and access to add other editors.
So
Okay.
I have access to edit it, so I edited it with the new Meet, but
Okay.
I can't record it for some reason. So
Awesome.
Okay.
Sorry, adding
with
my
that,
personal
hopefully
calendar
sorted
editor
out
was
of the
on my
way.
to-do list before I left Google, and it did not get done.
All right. So with that hopefully out of the way, what agenda do we have for this meeting today?
I have a question. I've been working with Nate on, ramping up on zTunnel. And one of the things that we've both encountered, we're both on the new MacBook M2s, and we've struggled to get the zTunnel to build. It appears to be related to the fact that we're on ARM processors. Wanted to know if other people had encountered that difficulty and knew how to overcome it. Or if this, world's smallest violin, if we're the only ones facing this problem, then we'll figure it out ourselves.
I tried a bit on cross-compiling, so I don't have an ARM laptop, and I had issues. At the very least, you'll need to disable the FIPS mode, since that actually doesn't support ARM. But even once I did that, I ran into some issues. I'm guessing there's a way around it. I just didn't do it yet. It was boring SSL that was the issue, but they do build an ARM on that version without the FIPS mode. So there's probably just some wrangling you need to do. I did notice there was some commit about ARM in the boring library for the Rust bindings in a newer commit than what we have. So it's possible that if we just like bumped ahead or something, it'll work. I don't know. If you send me an M2 laptop, maybe I'll help out.
Yeah, the alternative option here, I think, is to create an OpenSSL build variant. I think there are other reasons maybe to want that as well.
Boring definitely works on ARM, right? Because we Envoy.
Yeah, no, Chrome works on ARM, so Boring definitely works on ARM. But I think there are other reasons why we might want an OpenSSL variant anyway, right? So either of those are viable. I had the same problem as you, Mitch. I was hacking away, turning off FIPS and trying to update the build, but I didn't get enough time on my weekend to finish it. So I don't think we want React to do native Rust TLS custom. OpenSSL, that would be because of vendor preference for it. If they wanted to use OpenSSL based FIPS, right? OpenSSL being this massive integration point for a bunch of people. So. I don't know how hard it would be to create the OpenSSL variant. I suspect not very hard, right? It's just a factory for the SSL bindings, right? So some conditional build stuff.
So a question for this is: this will be a top, not a top, high priority item? I mean, to provide an OpenSSL option.
I would say right now, no. I think it's probably more important that we get the build working on more platforms than it is that we get it working with OpenSSL. So I think it's a medium-term priority.
Okay, shall we create an issue at least in our repo?
Yeah, I think that would be fine. John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's probably not a ton of work. It's just a lot of copy and pasting, probably. I mean, Linkerd actually does it with boring SSL and Rust TLS, which are very different libraries. The OpenSSL and boring SSL are pretty similar. So
yeah, I don't think we're going to bother with Rust TLS until there's a FIPS certified version of it.
Yeah, which will probably never happen, or not for not for timelines that we care about.
Yeah. I mean, if somebody wants to contribute an option to do a build with Rust TLS, as long as it didn't spaghetti the code, I think that would be fine. But
yeah, if they put Rust in kernel, that may be interesting, but instead of KTLS. But anyways, that's far in the future. Just
they already put OpenSSL in the kernel, so
I didn't know
some of it, right? That's what KTLS is.
All right.
Anyway, Mitch, are you volunteering to fix the Mac build? And
yeah, we'll take the lead on that.
okay, that'd be awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so Sudi, you had a question in the chat looking for the project page for Ambient. I don't believe we have a dedicated product page. So what we have is, as part of the Istio project, there is a label for Ambient Mesh. So that's how you can see different issues in there. There's also a dedicated zTunnel project, which Francis was presenting the board for zTunnel for folks who are interested to help out with zTunnel.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, great. I do have a topic. I want to kind of discuss, I guess, the strategy for Edgebone. So yesterday, I saw in a comment, so remember, John, you had a cherry pick PR of cherry pick Edgebone implementation for sidecar in Istio 1.16, right? So that PR was merged, so Edgebone is landed in 1.16 for sidecar. But interestingly, I think Quad made a comment that I just happened to saw yesterday that it talks about, hey, the code change for Edgebone in 1.16 is being overwritten or rewrite, and it's derived from master. So I assume in release 1.16, it's just we get the feeling of, hey, we're paving the road for people to interrupt between sidecar to ambient, but in the meanwhile, that code is being rewritten. Is that a foul statement of where we are at the moment? Or
that sounds like it. I mean, I'm not super involved with what Quat's doing in Envoy, but to some extent, does it matter too much? The protocol is remaining the same. It's just the internal implementation in Envoy that's changing, right?
So the interface would remain the same while we use the environment variable to kind of indicate the pod is using Edgebone, can understand the edge.
Yeah, there's no user-facing changes
okay.
that are anticipated. It's all just internals changing.
Okay, so that's all internal. Okay, so probably less important for users at the moment. And then for Edgebone for ambient, I think zTunnel, we would have to implement code for Edgebone, which you already have some of the code. For waypoint proxy, I know, Louis, you talk about the sandwich approach. That's just something entertained at the moment because the waypoint proxy would have Edgebone implementation because we need the Edgebone implementation for the sidecar anyway, right?
Yes, though anything that reduces the Envoy configuration footprint, right, is probably a net win. So we'll have to see performance-wise, right?
Yeah.
If they
but I guess my point is we need to do the work for the sidecar anyway. So you will have the code for Envoy with Edgebone and maintain that code for sidecar for a long time too, right?
Yes.
Unless you say you can move to HTTP3 with sidecar, which seems not reasonable. So
Well, the other option would be to sandwich the sidecar. Right? Right, we have to consider that option as well. In which case, we don't need the code in Envoy.
Interesting. So sandwich sidecar with ztunnel.
Actually, that's something I want to also bring up. I mean, maybe we should start building, sidecars with ztunnel linked in and start and experiment a bit with sandwiching, because there is a lot of complexity in Envoy. I agree kind of with what that the current generated code in Envoy to support each tunnel, it's a bit complicated.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see a suggestion. Are you suggesting an in-process sandwich custom?
Not in process, but in container. So the container will also have the ztunnel. The Istio agent will exec the ztunnel as well, and
yeah. So just sandwich it.
Sandwich, but light sandwich. I mean, just a bit of mayonnaise.
Yes, it's a but it's a finger sandwich.
But and also I mentioned in the comment, it's not very hard to add kind of a legacy Istio where we just extend a bit the pass-through mode that we have for external destination and RTLS and eliminates the complexity, because there is a lot of risk and it will accelerate things if we just don't bother with.
Okay, so we should put that on the tracking issue to experiment with a sandwich sidecar.
We also talked about using the ztunnel on the node instead of a sandwich.
Yeah.
Lynn, if you remember, I think Kevin.
Yeah. That's an interesting proposal too. I think the other thing, Louis, would be interesting is instead of using ztunnel as a sidecar, given when waypoint proxy or sidecar runs, there's probably already a co-located ztunnel. Can we reuse that ztunnel with, do it with the sidecar? I think that would be also interesting to explore.
Yeah, no, I think they're all kind of variants of the same basic pattern. We just got to pick the ones that make the most sense. What ones are the easiest for users to, right? Because most of this is a transition path problem, right?
Not for waypoint proxy. It's where
no. For in the terminal case, we have waypoints and possibly sidecars, right? We're still making a determination about. But in the intermediate cases, right? What are the best set of options? I would be quite happy with an Envoy sidecar and the ztunnel daemon set running. That would be a perfectly valid solution as an upgrade path for a user.
I'm looking for the other alternative for VMs and other similar environments where you don't have the per node. But yes, if the per node exists, then it will be ideal to use it.
Yeah, so I guess we have an interesting decision to make for the transition, right? Because putting HBone into sidecar was to enable an incremental upgrade, right? That's why it's there. Is it a better choice to just tell users to install, right, the daemon, right, and then somehow turn off MTLS in the sidecar? Like, how would that work?
Yeah, for that way we have. The problem is delegation again. It's not difficult to have Envoy not do TLS, and it's not difficult for ztunnel to actually forward to Envoy after decryption. But we are back to the problem of how do we pass metadata and it's TCP. So that's really the.
I suspect the best upgrade path would be a sandwiched envoy where the Z-tunnel was delivered as basically in the same container. And then that is turned off if we detect that there's a Z-tunnel available on the node.
But still, how do we send certificate to the envoy? And I looked a bit into this, and so far the only option implemented in envoy is AJ proxy protocol, which is again has its own problems.
Oh, yeah. How do you extract metadata?
Yeah, how do you know the envoy? We need to.
Yeah, no, we would have to solve that problem, right?
Yeah,
So
that's the one that is really the blocking factor. Either we use AJ proxy or we implement something else for metadata.
Yeah, we're not going to use the proxy protocol. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. But we can discuss other options. But from a pattern standpoint, right, that probably seems like the easiest upgrade path for users, right? Because when that's ready, right, they just get a rolling update of the sidecar, which now has two processes, two sidecars in it, and then eventually one of them just turns off, which is much easier than other upgrade path options.
I like it. Yeah, I like reusing the Z-tunnel daemon set if we can. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we would detect it then.
Yeah.
Right, but if it's not there,
yeah,
we still want it to work.
Yeah, makes sense.
Why would it not be there?
So let's say you have an existing sidecar-based Istio, right? And you start rolling out, right, an upgrade just to the sidecars, right? You've got a new Istio version, and we want that new Istio version to be HBone capable. You're not gonna, you may not roll out the daemon set at that point, right? You just may go through the standard Istio upgrade mechanisms, right? And not change any of your behavior or process yet, right? So you haven't really made a decision to adopt Ambient. You are, right? You're getting a transparent upgrade to HBone at that point.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is you could do that by installing the daemon set and having it handle.
Yes, that is the other way to do it, right? So,
right. And that way you don't have this situation where you're having to instruct users how to handle their 3 sidecars. I think there's definitely you can do it either way. But if they have to install the daemon set anyway, I think it offers a slightly cleaner path, assuming we can fix the, figuring out what traffic we need to capture, where, and all those other problems.
Yeah, there's a lot of things we need to figure out first, but I think we could lay out these patterns in a doc and evaluate their pros and cons from a kind of basic user experience standpoint.
Yeah. And I was thinking a different answer to Eitan, your question. You know how in 1.16, the community added as part of discovery selector configuration, you can configure what namespaces Istio control plane is processing the Istio CRD, and also create like the Istio root CA config map. So if we ever expose a configuration to say, hey, I only want Z-tunnel maybe installed on a node that has this particular label and nothing else. So you could potentially have a scenario that some of your pods are just running on the nodes without Z-tunnel for a while. And some of your pods are in ambient.
I mean, I think this is a nightmare. It will be a nightmare because it's very difficult to control what nodes you're attached, how you get it. The whole thing where you have multiple version of Z-tunnel, it's not going to fly very well with the current model with daemon set. We may need a different approach to achieve the same goal, but I don't think what we are doing in Istio for proxies will work here.
Right. So the problem to solve here is a no downtime, right, upgrade for the user. That means that when we talk to an endpoint, we need to know what protocol to talk to it with. Right. And today we cannot, cutting over from the ALPN driven TLS protocol selection for the tunnel to the HBone one requires endpoint awareness, right, about what's available at the endpoint to do that. If the customer is willing to take downtime, it's easy, right?
I think my understanding was that the feature in Istio was intended for the soft multi-tenant, where you have few namespaces that are only locally talking with each other and have different root CA, and other namespaces in a different group, kind of a different mesh.
Sorry, what?
Lynn, was that what you're talking about, or upgrade?
He was talking about the names, discover selector for namespaces. Could be, yeah. Actually, I'm not too familiar, but I thought it was a pretty cool thing they added. I think Zhonghu added that. It could well be used for soft multi-tenancy, like you said, because I can see why would people not want Istio resources to be processed in a namespace if if they put the Istio resource in there.
Yeah, it's also for scaling, because you have 1,000 namespace. You can kind of create small meshes with. It's a cool feature, but it's not a good fit for zTunnel, I think. I mean, and also it's probably not necessary, because we have this on-demand thing with kind of killing a lot of. So there are other ways to do it if we want to do it, but not with watchers and.
Okay, we seem to be talking about two different things at this point.
Yes, it is two different things. So Louis, I think your point is there's a challenging of shifting from the sidecar word, which doesn't understand edgebone, to a word that the traffic needs to can only process edgebone. So we need to kind of, how do we enable that switch to be seamlessly, right? From users are running sidecar today, and then from an upgrade to a newer version of Istio, somehow they would be able to speak edgebone, and then maybe get it from the zTunnel as a sidecar, or maybe get it from the zTunnel as a daemon set, if there's a daemon set that exists for them.
Right. So there's a couple of ways to get the implementation of HBone, but we still have to have all the endpoint controls to know what protocols we're going to speak. Right. This is like how auto MTLS worked, right?
Yeah.
The endpoints spoke plain text, and then they were capable of speaking TLS, and then the clients knew to start speaking TLS to them. Right. It's a similar type of problem. Right. And that we solved that by putting labels on the endpoints and then delivering those labels to Envoy, telling it what to do.
Yeah. So in the case of the sidecar, we would do the same, right? The sidecar needs to know whether the destination can speak edgebone or not, or whether it can only process plain text or legacy mutual TLS.
Right, the legacy TLS tunnel.
Yeah.
Now we could put that legacy TLS tunnel feature into zTunnel, right? And then the Envoy could just sit on top of it, right? That, I think, in theory works. But it requires distributing metadata about the endpoints as custom descriptive.
Yeah, but except that the sidecar already speaks the legacy TLS. So what's the value to get it from zTunnel?
It's not a complicated protocol to implement. We already have to do capability distribution to zTunnel, and it would make the composition clearer, right?
And metadata, metadata, which is horrible in the current Istio.
So, yeah, and this is a complexity trade-off, right? Is it easier to do it by putting the old protocol into the zTunnel temporarily, right, enabled by a flag, and then just stripping all of the tunneling stuff out of Envoy, and then let zTunnel deal with the switch to HBone, right? And then we don't have two HBone implementations. Right, and the zTunnel has to see all the certificate material as well, right? So that might, right, that would make it possibly easier, right, less complex overall, easier to debug, because you don't have two different systems both loading the same certs, right, et cetera, et cetera. But it would be a transitional thing, right? That code would eventually just be removed.
Yeah, the legacy TLS code in ztunnel. Yeah,
right.
as
the sandwich also simplifies the side. And even if you need sidecars because you want to client-side load balancing or whatever, having all the TLS certificates, all the mounted whatever removed from the sidecar will also simplify the life of sidecar users, even if there is Envoy.
Yeah, the Envoy configuration would become a lot simpler.
Yeah. Just policy enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. I have the other question for Ambient. So the question is currently Ambient can only run on some specific environment. For a lot of CNI, we cannot support. I actually opened a issue long time ago, and there are some response that there are big refactor on this part. So want to know what's the future direction for this part.
I'm not quite sure I understood the question.
Yeah, currently, maybe let me repeat. So my question is currently, if you want to run Ambient, it requires some specific CNIs. For example, in Calico, it doesn't work. So what's the plan to fix this kind of problem? Because, this, I think is a very basic problem. We need to make sure Ambient can work seamlessly in most of the clusters. No matter what CNI plugin the cluster is using, but currently we can't.
Right, so it's a testing backlog problem, Iris.
And also support for the platform to have the capabilities necessary. But keep in mind there is always the option to run it as a sidecar. I mean, if necessary. That's why it's useful to support VMs and other things. Because, for example, if the kernel or platform or vendor does not support eBPF, and the other features, we could fall back to running ztunnel in the sidecar, even if it's not ideal.
Oh, so you mean the conclusion is if we only support the PTP like setting, for others they need to switch using ztunnel in the sidecar?
I don't think there is a choice. I mean, if ideally the platform needs to support the infrastructure, I mean, the CNI provider needs to support whatever ztunnel requires, and the kernel and the node or whatever. But if we do not have them, what alternatives do we have? I mean, we cannot force them to have it.
Right, it's an existing limitation we have with sidecar as well, right?
Yeah.
It's not related with the kernel, I think, but related with especially the redirection rules. Yeah.
How they interact with how the CNI is implemented? Yes. I've seen this, and it's a valid concern. But I think unless we can fix the CNI or convince them to use a different CNI provider, the only option that is viable is to use ztunnel as a sidecar, which we need anyway for VM support and other things. So it's worth investing
in. But this, from my point of view, will block a lot of customers.
Right.
For example, the ztunnel, the purpose is to reduce sidecar, right? To have a node level proxy here, but.
So Iris, I think there's efforts underway to make this work on other platforms, but it's an open source project. So there are a couple platforms that we're targeting. I'm sure there are other people that are targeting other ones, but if there's a platform that you specifically are interested, you can always do the work to do that. I mean, and I think there will be more platforms that are supported to do that node level, but people are contributing what they can and focusing on the areas that are most important to them right now. So I'm sure there will be larger coverage, but it will take some time.
Yeah, it's a backlog problem. I saw in the chat somebody from Azure, I think, got it working with AKS.
Yes,
I don't know what
did.
CNI provider that was with, but and I don't know what hacking they had to do it, but it clearly shows that this can be done. But there's as Justin said, this is an open source project. If you need one to meet, if you need to get one working and nobody else has made it work yet, then hack away, please.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question. Suri, I saw you have a hand. Should we move to you?
So one more question. So is serverless also in scope of what we are doing with Ambient?
I
hope so.
When you say serverless, do you just mean code that runs without a node, right? Without the layer of abstraction?
Probably, yeah. So get started from there, and then most of it is like that, yeah. Like Fargate or maybe ECS, Knative.
Knative runs on Kubernetes.
Yeah,
right?
so which
it's
is
gonna have
actually a good
node.
case.
Yeah, so
what
that one's
about
fine.
Yeah, without the node?
So certainly, as Costin mentioned, right, we still need to make the ztunnel capable of running as a sidecar. So if you can run a sidecar in ECS or Fargate, which I don't claim to be an expert in, and you can find a way to push the traffic through it, then the system will work. But it's kind of the same issue with the CNIs, right? It's very likely that the Google folks here will work with Knative and whatever works in GKE, and probably make it work with Cloud Run. But it's not high on my list as a Google person to make it work on Fargate, though I suspect somebody could go make it work on Fargate, and we would help them if somebody had the motivation to go and do that.
Got it. So I mean, just to get the direction, I mean, it is another sidecar like ztunnel, and then wanted to Istio as the controller.
Yeah.
Okay. So that would
you're
be
the first person to ask this. Go ahead.
Yeah. So additionally, I mean, that would also mean that we need to run an additional cluster of Istio on a serverless platform.
You don't need a cluster. You need Istio D and some source of configuration.
Which can't run without an Kubernetes cluster, I think.
That's not entirely true.
Okay.
We have additional sources of configuration. There is support for, well, it's not very well supported, but we always had support to running, Consul, other XDS Federation, and all the other stuff that is in mesh config advanced configurations from galley time.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not very aware of that, but yeah, good to know that. Thanks. And yeah, I mean, if we can keep the serverless also in scope, it will be really great, because there are users wanting to go on each platform and still want to have the mesh to help with connectivity. Thanks.
So are you looking at Ambient primarily for mutual TLS for serverless?
It's just because it's a new project. I mean, it's good to basically also include serverless also in the scope, because a lot of application would actually, I see most of them moving to serverless. So that way.
Do you have bandwidth to help work on that?
Bandwidth too?
To help build that out?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to get involved. I mean, I'll be really happy to basically.
I suspect a lot of the serverless thing will need support from the actual serverless provider. They're generally not terribly open platforms, right? I mean, we can't even run sidecars on Fargate, for example, right? So we're not going to be able to run ztunnel unless they let us run it.
I think you can probably run two binaries in the same container and make proxy protocol work in Fargate. Yeah. I think that's about as far as I've seen anybody get so far.
That's what we're doing in Cloud Run as well. I mean, and until the platform has it, I mean, it's perfectly possible to run multiple binaries in the same container or multiple containers.
Yeah, but it will not be non-intrusive. I mean, it has to talk to localhost instead of
No, well, at least for Cloud Run, capture works perfectly fine. I mean, doesn't talk with localhost.
Sorry.
Yeah, so I guess the meta point here is Costin has made it work on Cloud Run pretty well. He has not, and is unlikely to try and make it work on ECS, being that he was from Google. But if somebody wants, to give that a go, I'm sure he'd answer questions for them on the chat.
That'll be great. I mean, if you can share what you have, Costin, I'll be very happy to take it to ECS.
So, Costin, with Cloud Run Mesh, does this mean you've also tested Ambient with Knative as well? I assume Cloud Run uses Knative.
It's internal implementation. It should work with Knative as well. I don't see any reason why it won't work with. But with Knative, you can work with a fair node because you don't have to go through this kind of extra complexities.
Okay.
Knative is interesting because in Knative they have the activator. Probably we should have a discussion about this because they have the activator, which is not very compatible with H1. So if they would make some changes to their activator to support H1, it would be a much better experience for Knative users.
Yeah, the Knative guys are actually pretty interested in having waypoints. It's a much better model for them. But we haven't done any testing with that. Yes, if anybody asks, have we tested X other than GKE, the answer is probably no right now.
Okay. That makes sense.
We've tested kind. I suppose we've tested kind.
Of course, yes.
Oh.
And localhost, local working everything. Local development is the closest to a VM that exists. I mean, so we tested quite a bit.
Yeah, we've not tested Rancher or OpenShift CNI or Azure Functions or other things like that.
Yeah, OpenShift, we tried it. We couldn't get it working yet. There's some issue with the CNI with the redirect code.
Okay.
So that's why it's very useful to have the ideal situation, but also fall back to run it as a sidecar, because sidecar it's using the same IP table at TCO. It's not very different. Just swap and void with ztunnel and it's good enough.
Yeah, so sidecar may stay for a very, very long time.
Yeah, but it's a smaller sidecar. It's not so fat.
Okay.
All right, anything else we should be discussing?
Yeah, is Ethan here? Right, so obviously we're trying to get, like, we have our burn down list, right, the project stuff that Francis was showing. So as with all
Ethan's not here.
Oh, he's not
Yeah,
here.
Ethan, I believe, is taking a day off today.
Slacker.
Only because he worked over the weekend.
That is completely fair. I'm well aware of what happened. But yeah, please sign up for items on the list. It seems like we should probably have a tracking item for prioritizing CNIs to go and follow up with, or at least to get some kind of prioritized list of CNIs that people are interested in making work.
Well, so we can just add the CNI support to the backlog after we fix the permissions issue with the project, and then we can prioritize them in the board itself.
But yeah, for the moment, right, it's going to be a pretty vanilla list, right? Covering more and more environments. Obviously, it gets pretty expensive from a development standpoint, right? So we're going to need some help.
Also, I want to I want to clarify that this project here, this project was specific to zTunnel, and I'll be working with John to track one for Ambient sidecar as well. These two should not be confused as one single project. So we don't have a project board for just Ambient waypoint yet. We'll have one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, probably the sandwich question probably exists in both boards. John, what do you think about the idea of sandwiching the sidecar to get HBone?
I kind of like it. I think it really depends on getting the metadata passing and what that looks like. Yeah. If that is really good and works well and it's efficient and all that, it's probably more viable. If it's not, then that may be a huge overhead and source of complexity. So, because we'll not just need to pass the identity as well for sandwich, we'll probably also need to pass like the source IP and port and other things as well. Maybe, or we just do the transparent outbound smoothing thing. I don't know. Well, I think it's worth exploring at least, but I don't know what it's going to end up looking like.
Okay, we probably need to fire up a doc on that one.
Yeah, is there anyone that wants to own that metadata? I don't know what we call it, metadata passing.
Oh, you mean the API or
the protocol?
Just like the whole protocol. Yeah.
Ask Justin to look at the routing, but metadata is a different logical concern.
I can spend some time on this, but I'm trying to understand, Louis, what is your concern with tproxy for a short-term solution?
Oh no, I'm fine with tproxy, right? So like
not tproxy, sorry, the AJ proxy, the proxy protocol, the using, because it's already supported in Envoy, that would a short term at least until we have some replacement. It may be.
Okay, so I guess that's one of the options for sandwiching the sidecar, right, Custom?
Short term, at least, yes. Just have the zTunnel generate the AJ proxy header, and then Envoy already supports the AJ proxy header, and will extract stuff from it. I don't like the protocol, but it could work, and until we have.
Yeah, no, yeah. So let's just we need to capture the list of options, right?
Okay.
That's probably fine as an interim if we're only doing TCP. It's not where we want to be in the long run. I think the more important question is, right, like, do we put the legacy TLS negotiation into the zTunnel, right, so that then it can do the endpoint selection, right, for in-place upgrade. That's probably the most impactful decision, right? And everything else would kind of fall out after that.
I can volunteer to work on this. I wrote a document in the past about the egress, doing this for egress gateways and east-west gateways, and I think it's important to keep them aligned. But if other people have more time or interest, happy to collaborate.
Do we also care about the particular performance of how much do we care about the performance of this aspect as it's being aimed as a transitionary feature? And if so, does that impact which route we end up going with?
I think it matters quite a bit because while we may use it for even for Envoy, it may not be short term right on the waypoint. But I'd imagine we'd use the same functionality for applications wanting to know the identity that was used as well.
Yeah, I agree. So I just want to make sure that we, don't take the shortest path here. Right? We really identify all the different paths and actually try them.
Yeah, so I mean, the options for metadata passing, right, as opposed to a metadata API, right, like basically prefixing like Austin described, and out-of-band lookup, right, is the other option. Which there's existing, code doing that in Envoy today as well. So. as far as I'm right, the Cilium folks implemented that using an eBPF map, right? And there's code showing that. So there's basically put it in the protocol, right? Like HA proxy, so proxy protocol. Put it in an eBPF map or a socket option, or put it in an endpoint that you call that exists on the interface to look up peer metadata. Those would be the three fundamental options. Some are more complex than others. And Custom's probably right that proxy protocol is the easiest of them if we're going to do in-band existing Envoy support. You could argue that the eBPF thing is also in-band, sort of. A look-aside API is not.
I suspect it will need to end up implementing all four long term, because AJ proxy and connect are used by infrastructure, and probably will help integrate with some stuff. SOCs is definitely, socket option is definitely the best because most secure, most clean and fastest. And MDS is relatively easy and doesn't cost anything, and they're frequently used. So I think it's just a matter of prioritization, because in the end we'll have to support all of them for some use cases.
Yeah, if I had to pick one today, I would probably pick MDS. It's not the fastest. It's the most general purpose.
Yeah, we should get it into there. I mean, that's super easy to implement. It's just an HTTP server that returns some sort of a hash map. But Envoy will not work with it very well because it doesn't know how to query.
Yes, we'd have to go put that code in.
And it has code for AJ proxies. That's why I was suggesting that. Even if I don't like the protocol, it's...
Envoy does actually have an API to do this custom. It's called x.z or xproc.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a very good point, John. You're doing MDS. Maybe that could also act as an external Z.
I don't
set headers basically in the return and
maybe I don't know if I fully follow. Maybe.
I'll talk.
Right. So let's put that in the. We need to write up a doc of options so people can. I think we are just about out of time too, but we obviously need a doc for this, right? But certainly calling X things is a commonly used pattern for doing augmentation, right? Which is what looking at metadata is. So we might be able to repurpose it, right, and not invent an API.
So who's going to take an action item on that to write the doc?
I think Custon sort of volunteered himself. Am I correct, Custon? You volunteered yourself?
Yep, I kind of. Unless someone wants to relieve me.
And just to be explicit here, so Custon, you're going to write a doc. Will this be a design doc or just a scoping doc, or
a light design doc, but with the options that exist and maybe some code for.
And on the topic of.
But we'll need someone from familiar with Envoy to make some changes for the authorizations. That's what was blocking the east-west and egress. Because it's the same problem we're trying to solve it in egress and east-west. To have metadata passed and Envoy use it. So we need to find someone to volunteer from Envoy.
I need to run to another meeting. Can you do me a favor and just fill out this last part here?
Got some quotes sent up here today. That was something about using filter state instead of the cert for RBAC. I think the cert is populated from filter state for sorry, the filter state is populated from the cert today, but that's probably a good building block for what you're looking at.
Yeah, that's what we're missing there. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that it may just happen.
Thanks, everyone.
See you, everybody.